Hello, my name is Luis Manta. I will be discussing technology today. Due to many changes in technology, some tech giant companies, like Microsoft, may cease to exist in the near future. Technologies like open source, cloud computing, and the developments of hardware and the Internet of Things will have major effects on the giant tech companies of today. This presentation will explain open source, cloud computing, and the recent developments in hardware and software and the Internet. The first topic, for those of you who don't know, is open source. Open source is a software that has a source code included. This means that anyone can modify, alter, or change it to either make it better or change it to the exact specifications that they prefer. Open source contradicts the methods in which software has been most prevalently created and used for the past decade. Originally, the source code was created by the programmer and then go through a compiler that would translate the code so that the computer would be able to understand it. Because the code was put through a compiler and the source code wasn't given, other programmers couldn't figure out what the code was, so they couldn't really make alterations to it. This changed when Linux came about. Linux decided to come up with a source code that was given with the compiler information so that other programmers could change it to their exact specifications. This thus prompted open source. Open source is now commonly used by a lot of the big companies because, one, Linux has made it free, and two, it's the best stuff out there. Because so many programmers are making modifications to it and making it better, that means that all the bugs and everything that can be wrong with it and all the other things it can do have been updated by the best programmers out there. A company being affected by this is Microsoft. Microsoft used to be, and kind of still is, the leader in software, but that's not going to be for long. This is because Microsoft charges for their software. Another problem with Microsoft software is that they don't give you the source code so that people can't alter it, and it only works the way Microsoft wants it to work. Therefore, as I said before, big companies like Google, Facebook, and Amazon are no longer using Microsoft, but they're using Linux. This is big trouble for Microsoft because now that they don't have the big tech companies using them, they're getting in some hot water because of this. We'll see what Microsoft can kind of do in order to catch up with Linux and their software. The next topic I'm going to talk about is cloud computing. Cloud computing is the unified sharing of software and information through the Internet. The cloud has revolutionized how we use, share, and store information through the Internet. Cloud computing is about converged infrastructures and shared services. With cloud computing, local computers no longer have to do most of the work when it comes to applications. There's a network of computers that handle the running of applications instead. One of the major companies that jumped onto cloud computing early was Netflix. I believe Netflix started using the cloud in 2008, about 2009. They started using the cloud because their database of movies was so huge that they didn't really trust their computers to be able to hold all the information, and it was way too hard to be backed up. This way, when they put it on the cloud, it was much easier for everyone to access, so all their customers, and it was backed up by the cloud, so there wasn't any need to be afraid of losing the information. Since then, a lot of companies have followed Netflix's lead, but Netflix has seen their profits explode in recent years because of how they revolutionized the market. Other companies, such as Apple and Google, have now jumped on the cloud as well. Both of these systems use the cloud in many different ways, but basically it now allows consumers like me and you with Apple to store all the things on our phone up in the cloud so that we don't lose them. And Google allows us to use Google Docs and save those kind of things in the cloud as well. Some people are a little bit afraid of the cloud and they think their information can get stolen. But I want to tell you that the cloud is actually very safe and secure, and it's one of the most reliable ways to store your information, because if your computer crashes and you don't have any of your stuff backed up, then you lose it forever. This way, old pictures and things of that nature can be saved. The next topic I'm going to talk about is computer hardware. Computer hardware are the physical components that make up the machine. All the pieces of the computer hardware can actually be touched. So when I'm talking about computer hardware, I'm talking about what you see on the computer. On the left is the first computer ever made. It was the size of the room and could do similar functions to the calculator you have now. On the right is the IBM personal computer. It was one of the first personal computers out there, and it made huge strides from the big computer that you see on the left, but compared to nowadays, it's actually quite a bulky thing with a big monitor and big keyboard. Since then, we've had a lot of adjustments in the hardware because things can start holding more memory, and they've started becoming smaller and smaller. The huge fad has become to store more memory, be faster, and use less space. Another big thing is the touchscreen technology that you see on the tablets, like the iPad, and you can see with the Chromebook that companies are making their laptops smaller and smaller because less hardware is needed to do everything that has to be done. The next topic I'm going to talk to you guys about is the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things describes the future of technology and how physical tools we use interact with it. So, for example, the Internet of Things is going to be all the common things you use today that are going to be connected to the Internet. This is kind of it's not a fairly new idea, but it's become popular fairly new. So that's why many of you guys haven't heard of it. One thing I want to talk about first is that this is not a new topic. In 1980, Carnegie Mellon created a soda dispenser that told you how many cans was left, so that Carnegie Mellon could keep refilling it. This kind of started the Internet of Things, where we took household appliances and connected them to the Internet to help us out with our daily lives. This is kind of a futuristic picture of what people believe is going to start happening with the Internet of Things. As you can see, the stove projects recipes so that you can be cooking and not have to have a recipe book by you, or even anything for that matter. It'll just tell you exactly what you need to put in. And the fridge is telling you how old things are in your fridge and when they expire, so that way you can just look on the fridge and see when the things expire and when you have to get rid of them. The sink also dispenses the right amount of soap, and the cutting boards show you which kind of foods go on which section of the cutting board. These are just a few examples of things that are going to be happening and things that companies are working on. I'm pretty sure in the next few years you'll start to see innovations, if not like these, very, very similar. Next, I'm going to talk about companies being affected by these things. As I talked about earlier, Microsoft is one of the biggest companies being affected because most of their money comes from software that they sell. Since companies are moving away from their software, even though Microsoft still has a big portion of the market share, you can see things starting to tilt. This should be causing Microsoft to get scared, so we'll see what they'll come up with in order to compete with Linux. One of the hard things is that Linux provides free software and Microsoft does not, so we'll also see how Microsoft will have to balance that out as well. Another problem with Microsoft is that they don't use the cloud. At least they didn't. Now they're starting to, and the likes of Google and Amazon have been using the cloud for years longer than they have, so we'll see how Microsoft adjusts to that. Most people believe that Microsoft won't be a big tech leader in the near future, but we'll have to see. Two other companies being affected by the hardware are Intel and AMD. Intel has always been the leader in chip production, which is found on the motherboard. The chip basically runs the computer. It does all the key function that a computer needs. AMD has always been a competitor in the market, but have always been much smaller than Intel. The thing is, AMD owns ARM technology. ARM technology is a new kind of chip that runs much faster and much cheaper and uses less energy than the original Intel chip. These chips are being used in phones and starting to be used in tablets. Although Intel has now produced quite a few tablet chips, they haven't gained a huge. They haven't really come up with a big chip for the phone market, although I heard they will be coming out with one. Because of this, some people think AMD might take over Intel, but Intel still holds a majority of the market share. Since Intel kind of jumped on the bandwagon a little bit late, they are behind, but they seem to be making strides in order to improve that. Another thing they're doing is paying companies a lot of money in order to keep their products inside their devices, which isn't the best business plan, but the fact that they're staying within the market is probably a good idea. No one really knows what's going to happen here, and it's a little less clear than the Microsoft issue. Another big company is Cisco. Ever since Wi-Fi was being developed, Cisco has always been on top of their game. A lot of the household appliances you'll be seeing are going to have to do with Cisco. They are a big part of the Internet of Things. They're really pioneering the whole field, if you will. Um, Another company like Cisco that's working on things like this is Google. If you've seen the Google Glass or the Google cars that drive themselves, this is another couple things that are being experimented with by the Internet of Things. A lot of things Cisco and Google are doing aren't out on the consumer market yet, but I'm pretty sure they will be in the next couple years, so I would look out for them. In conclusion, I hope you guys have learned about the four main topics I talked about, which are open source, cloud computing, the developments of hardware, and the developments of Internet of Things, and even what the Internet of Things is. I hope maybe next time you go to the store or something, you think about these kind of things, and who knows, maybe some of these things I talked about will end up being the next big thing. Thank you very much.